Dave Mackenzie was having a spectacularly shitty Tuesday when the aliens abducted him. The power had gone out in his apartment during a thunderstorm. His car wouldn't start, and he'd been fired from his job as a high school physics teacher for telling the principal's son that his science fair project violated 3 laws of thermodynamics and possibly 1 local ordinance. So, when the swirling vortex of purple light appeared in his living room at 11:47 p.m., Dave didn't even bother to put down his lukewarm beer. "Sure, why not?" he muttered as the light enveloped him. Tuesday's gonna Tuesday. The sensation of being disassembled at the molecular level felt oddly like brain freeze from eating ice cream too quickly. When Dave's consciousness reassembled, he found himself standing in what appeared to be a sterile examination room. The walls pulsed with a faint bluish bioluminescence, and the air smelled like ozone and something vaguely reminiscent of cucumber. 3 beings observed him from behind what Dave assumed was a force field. They resembled 7-foot-tall praying mantises with iridescent purple exoskeletons and 4 pairs of compound eyes arranged in a vertical line. "Human subject appears conscious and stable," said the tallest one in flawless English. Its mandibles clicked softly as it spoke. "Vital signs within expected parameters." "Great," Dave said, setting his beer bottle on what looked like an expensive console. "I'm Dave Mackenzie. You've caught me at a convenient time, as I've recently become unemployed. To whom do I have the pleasure of speaking?" The aliens exchanged glances with their multiple eyes, their antennae twitching in what Dave interpreted as surprise. "I am Senior Acquisition Officer Tix of the Galactic Meritocratic Consortium," said the tallest one. "These are my colleagues, Analysis Specialist VRM and Cultural Integration Officer Fit." "Charmed," Dave replied. "I'm guessing this isn't a random abduction?" "Correct, David Mackenzie. Seg. You have been selected as the first human candidate for integration into the consortium's elite problem resolution core." "That sounds ominously vague," Dave said, looking around. "How'd I make the short list?" "My resume isn't exactly stellar at the moment. You possess several qualities our algorithms identified as valuable," said Analysis Specialist Vurum. Its voice was higher-pitched, almost musical. "Your educational background in theoretical physics, your adaptive problem-solving capabilities, and your psychological profile's unusually high tolerance for absurdity." Dave laughed. "That last one is just called being a public school teacher. The human displays inappropriate humor," Fela noted, tapping something into a floating panel of light. "Expected response pattern." "Look," Dave said, "I appreciate being selected for whatever this is, but I typically prefer to be asked before being molecularly disassembled." "Apologies," Dexeg said without sounding particularly apologetic. "Your species has not yet been formally invited into the consortium. We are conducting preliminary assessments of human potential before official first contact." "So I'm what? A test case?" Dave ran a hand through his disheveled brown hair. "You're evaluating humanity based on an unemployed physics teacher with a beer gut and student loan debt." "You undervalue yourself," Vurum said. "Your species is remarkably adaptable, if somewhat primitive. We believe humans might possess unique perspectives valuable to the consortium." "That's surprisingly flattering," Dave admitted. "Please follow us," Tiski said as the force field dissipated. "You will be given orientation and prepared for initial assessment." The corridors of what Dave assumed was a spaceship were vast and organic-looking, with walls that seemed to breathe subtly. The floor beneath his feet had a slightly springy quality, like walking on dense moss. Floating spheres of light drifted along the ceiling, illuminating their path. Occasionally they passed other alien species, some vaguely humanoid, others defying any terrestrial comparison. "This is like being inside a living organism," Dave observed, running his fingers along a wall that felt warm to the touch. "The vessel is partially biological," Fit explained. "It generates its own energy and repairs itself." "Neat," Dave said. "Better than my apartment." They entered a massive chamber that took Dave's breath away. The ceiling soared hundreds of feet above, displaying what appeared to be a real-time map of the galaxy. Below, thousands of aliens worked at stations arranged in concentric circles around a central crystalline structure that pulsed with energy. "Welcome to the Consortium Command Hub." "Tisky, Tisky." "Holy shit," Dave whispered, turning in a slow circle. "It's like NASA mission control designed by H.R. Geiger after a spiritual awakening." The human references obsolete cultural touchpoints, Featon noted. "Anticipated behavior." "You know," Dave said, "the running commentary is getting a little old." Rom's antennae twitched. "You find our observations offensive?" "Not offensive, just annoying. Like being a zoo exhibit." "Fascinating," Worm replied. "Most species are honored by our analytical attention." "Most species probably don't have reality television," Dave muttered. They led him to a small chamber off the main hub. Inside was what appeared to be a control station with a seat molded for human anatomy. "This will be your initial assessment station," Sixcock explained. "We will present you with a series of problems to evaluate your capabilities." "What kind of problems?" Dave asked, cautiously sitting in the chair. "Various scenarios the Consortium regularly encounters," Graham said. "Resource allocation conflicts, spatial-temporal anomalies, diplomatic impasses, extinction-level threats, standard challenges." "Standard?" Dave's eyebrows shot up. "Look, I'm good at explaining why you can't divide by zero to teenagers, but I'm not sure I'm qualified for extinction-level threats." "That is precisely why you were selected," Tiskax said. "Humans approach problems from unexpected angles due to your species' limited understanding of universal principles." "I feel like I've just been insulted and complimented simultaneously," Dave said. "It was merely an objective observation," Fett replied. The control panel in front of Dave lit up, displaying symbols and patterns that shifted before his eyes. "The interface will adapt to your cognitive framework," Gorham explained. "Think of it as an elaborate, intuitive test." Dave placed his hands on what appeared to be input sensors. The moment he made contact, the symbols rearranged themselves into English. "Huh?" he said. "That's convenient. Your first assessment begins now," Siskuk announced. "You will be presented with a diplomatic scenario involving two species threatening war over mining rights to a shared asteroid belt." The screen displayed detailed information about two alien species, the Drave silicon-based life forms with collective consciousness, and the Epir gaseous entities that communicated through electromagnetic fluctuations. "The Consortium has mediated for 3 cycles without resolution," Voram continued. "How would you approach this conflict?" Dave read through the information carefully. "Have you tried asking them why they want the asteroid specifically? What resources are they after?" The aliens exchanged glances. "The dispute is over territorial rights," Fitz said. "The resources are irrelevant to the conflict." "I doubt that," Dave countered. "Nobody fights over territory unless it contains something they want or need. What's in these asteroids that's worth going to war over?" Tisk's mandibles clicked rapidly. "The asteroids contain significant deposits of crystallized chromium, useful for temporal stabilization. And both species use chromium in their technology?" "The Drave acquired for consciousness transfer processes," Vorab admitted. "The Epika use it to maintain their electromagnetic coherence." "Then you're framing the problem wrong," Dave said. "This isn't about territory, it's about survival. Both species need this material to exist. Have you explored synthesizing chromium or finding alternative sources?" The aliens fell silent. The human identifies the underlying problem rather than addressing the presented conflict, Feta noted, sounding almost impressed. "Basic problem solving," Dave shrugged. "Any decent teacher knows that when students are fighting, there's usually something else going on beneath the surface." The test continued for hours. Dave tackled scenarios ranging from mathematical puzzles to ethical dilemmas, approaching each with what he considered common sense but what the aliens repeatedly called unprecedented cognitive frameworks. After the 12th scenario, Dave stood up and stretched. I need a break. Do you have bathrooms? Or food? I'm assuming you know what humans eat. Nutritional supplements have been prepared, Suck said, leading him to another chamber. The nutritional supplements turned out to be gray cubes that tasted vaguely like unseasoned chicken. Dave grimaced, but ate them anyway. So, he said between reluctant bites, how am I doing on your tests? Your problem-solving methodology is unusual, Gorham said. You consistently identify foundational factors we had not considered relevant. That's humans for you, Dave replied. We're good at cutting through bullshit. Cutting through excrement? Fish seemed confused. Another idiom? It means seeing past the obvious or stated problem to the real issue, Dave explained. A valuable skill, Skegg admitted. Perhaps too valuable. There was something in the alien's tone that made Dave pause. What exactly does that mean? Before Tuskeyes could answer, an alarm blared throughout the chamber. The walls pulsed red, and the alien's antennae stood rigid. Security breach in Sector 7, announced a disembodied voice. Unknown entity detected. Impossible, Worm hissed. Our defenses are impenetrable. Clearly not, Dave pointed out helpfully. The three aliens huddled together, chittering rapidly in their native language. Dave caught words like premature and containment protocol. What's happening? He demanded. A situation beyond your concern, Sukusek said dismissively. You will remain here until... The ship shuddered violently, throwing them all off balance. The lights flickered, and for a moment, the artificial gravity wavered. That felt like an explosion, Dave said, steadying himself against a wall. Are we under attack? Impossible, Fleet repeated, but with less conviction. The door to the chamber slid open, and a different alien species rushed in. This one resembling a cross between a tiger and an octopus with tentacles ending in razor-sharp claws. The Vrex have found us, it growled to Sex. They've disabled our primary defense grid. Who are the Vrex? Dave asked. A hostile species we've been at war with for 300 cycles. Brarm explained tersely. They seek to destroy the consortium. And they've never breached your defenses before? Never, Siskarx confirmed. Our security protocols are unmatched in the galaxy. Another explosion rocked the ship, closer this time. Warning lights flashed as artificial gravity fluctuated again. Take the human to safety, Tiski ordered Fate. We cannot lose our test subject. Hey, I have a name, Dave protested as Fordic grabbed his arm with surprising strength. And I'd like to know what's going on. The ship is under attack, Fitz said, pulling him toward an exit. That is what's going on. As they hurried through the corridors, Dave's mind raced. Something wasn't adding up. Wait, he said, pulling his arm free. You said these Vrex have never breached your defenses before, right? And you also mentioned I'm the first human you've brought aboard for testing. Correct on both accounts, Fett confirmed impatiently. Now we must... What if they're connected? Dave interrupted. What if they detected something different about your ship, something human? Fitz's multiple eyes blinked in sequence. Impossible. Human biosignatures are too primitive to trigger their sensors. Maybe it's not my biosignature, Dave mused. Maybe it's something else, something you overlooked because you don't understand humans as well as you think. The ship jolted again, and emergency force fields began activating throughout the corridor. We must reach the escape pods, Fit insisted. No, Dave said firmly. Take me to your communications array. That is not the evacuation protocol. I don't care about your protocol. If I'm right, I can stop this attack. After a moment's hesitation, Fist redirected them down a different corridor. They entered a small chamber filled with crystalline structures pulsing with light. This is a tertiary communications node, Ferk explained. What do you intend to do? Dave examined the alien technology, his mind working furiously. Your ship detected me when you abducted me, right? It analyzed my molecular structure. Of course, Standard procedure. And it's still analyzing me now? The ship continuously monitors all life forms aboard. Dave smiled grimly. That's it. Your ship is broadcasting my presence, my exact molecular structure on an open channel. The Vrivix aren't detecting your ship, they're detecting me. Fuxansane twitched violently. That is theoretically possible. But why would they? Earth must be important somehow. Dave interrupted. Either as a resource or strategically. These wrecks have probably been watching us for a while. Dave placed his hands on what appeared to be the main console. Can you show me the ship's outgoing communications frequency? Reluctantly, Fifth activated the console. A three-dimensional display appeared, showing waves of energy emanating from the ship in all directions. There, Dave pointed to a particular frequency band. That's the signal containing my molecular data. Can you shut it down? That would violate monitoring protocols. Fike objected. Your ship is under attack. Screw the protocols. With obvious reluctance, Fett manipulated the controls. The energy wave Dave had identified disappeared from the display. Almost immediately, the ship stopped shaking. The alarms continued, but no new explosions occurred. Dave exhaled slowly. I was right. Tiskutisk and Freyer burst into the chamber moments later, accompanied by several armed security aliens. The attack has ceased, Sagtusk announced, sounding bewildered. The Rex vessels are withdrawing. Yeah, because we stopped broadcasting my existence to the entire galaxy, Dave said. Want to tell me why the Vrix are so interested in human? The three aliens exchanged looks that even Dave could interpret as guilty. The human has identified the causality nexus, Varm said quietly. I figured out that you screwed up, Dave translated. Now tell me what's really going on. Kuskaski's mandibles clicked rapidly. The alien equivalent of a sigh. The Vrex fear humans, it admitted. Not as you are now, but as you will become. What does that mean? The consortium possesses limited temporal foresight. Worm explained. We have glimpsed potential futures. In many of them, humans become problematic for established galactic powers. Problematic how? You innovate too quickly, Fiss said. You adapt too readily. You think too differently. Dave laughed incredulously. So you're telling me that the most advanced alien empire in the galaxy is terrified of us because we're unpredictable? Not unpredictable, Saktask corrected. Incomprehensible. Your species makes intuitive leaps that defy rational analysis, just as you did moments ago. I just applied basic logic, Dave protested. No, Rim said quietly. You intuited a connection that our most advanced AI systems failed to identify. You recognized a pattern that should have been imperceptible to a mind at your evolutionary stage. Dave stared at them. So, what happens now? The three aliens looked at each other again. Now, Sakskisk said, we must reevaluate everything we thought we knew about humans. As if on cue, alarms began blaring again. Different ones this time. Temporal anomaly detected, announced the ship's AI. Chronofracture imminent. The aliens froze, their exoskeletons paling to a lighter shade of purple. What's a chronofracture? Dave asked, suddenly uneasy. A break in the fabric of time, Refarm whispered. Impossible without. The air in the center of the room began to shimmer and distort. A swirling vortex formed, remarkably similar to the one that had abducted Dave from his apartment. But instead of purple, this one shimmered with golden light. And, stepping through it was Dave Mackenzie. Except it wasn't quite him. This version was older, with streaks of gray in his hair and a network of scars across his face. He wore what appeared to be armor made of the same material as the ship's walls, and his eyes glowed with an inner light that was definitely not human. The older Dave smiled at his younger self, then turned to the terrified aliens. Hello, Sex Kusk, he said calmly. It's been a while, or rather, it will be a while. We need to talk about the future of human consortium relations. The alien's antennae went completely rigid with fear. The younger Dave looked between his future self and the aliens and managed a weak smile. So, I'm guessing this is why they're terrified of us. The moment Dave Mackenzie's future self stepped through the golden temporal vortex, the consortium flagship descended into chaos. Alarms blared as security forces flooded the communications chamber, their weapons trained on both Daves. The older version looked amused, while the younger one was still trying to process the fact that he was staring at himself with battle scars and glowing eyes. "Stand down," ordered a new voice. A tall serpentine alien glided into the room, its scales shifting colors like oil on water. "I am High Administrator Sistoth of the Consortium Council. Lower your weapons immediately." Skake's mandibles clicked in protest. "High Administrator, with respect, this is a Class 1 temporal violation. Protocol demands." "I'm well aware of protocol, Senior Officer," Stoth interrupted. "But protocol was broken the moment you brought the human aboard." The administrator's gaze shifted between the two Daves. "Now we deal with consequence." Younger Dave raised his hand like a student in class. "Hi, quick question. What the hell is going on?" And he pointed at his future self. "What happened to me? My eyes don't normally do quantum integration," his older self explained casually. "Side effect of the chromium exposure. Don't worry, it doesn't hurt much. I knew I should have stayed in bed this morning." Younger Dave muttered. High Administrator Toth's scales rippled in what might have been annoyance. "Take both humans to secure Chamber Alpha. Full isolation protocols." As they were escorted through the ship, Dave noticed the other aliens' reactions. Some recoiled in fear, others watched with undisguised fascination. News of what had happened was spreading rapidly. "You're causing quite a stir," Dave said to his future self. "Just wait," older Dave replied with a grim smile. "This is nothing compared to what's coming." "That's not ominous at all." Secure Chamber Alpha turned out to be a large, hexagonal room with walls that seemed to absorb light. Once inside, the security detail retreated, leaving the two Daves alone with Sods, Toth, Togsok, Vrame, and Feed. "Temporal duplicates should not coexist," Sostoth said, addressing the older Dave. "Your presence here violates fundamental laws of causality." "Your laws, not mine," older Dave replied, circling the room with the casual confidence of someone who knew exactly where all the hidden surveillance devices were located. "Besides, I'm not exactly a duplicate. More like an evolved version." "You claim to be from the future," Warp said. "How far?" 17 years, give or take a few months. Time gets a bit fluid when you're jumping between dimensions. Younger Dave choked. "Dimensions? Plural?" "The consortium has observed 11 dimensions," Sekskak said dismissively. "This is not new information." Older Dave laughed. "You've observed 11 and accessed 3. Humans eventually learned to navigate 27. The aliens exchanged alarmed glances. "Impossible," Rum whispered. "The theoretical limit is 23, and even those are quantum fluctuations too unstable for conventional interaction," older Dave finished. "But human brains aren't conventional. We make connections across dimensional barriers that your species can't even perceive." He tapped his temple. "It's why the Vreks are hunting me." "Us." Younger Dave looked back and forth between his future self and the increasingly agitated aliens. "I'm just a physics teacher. I barely understand string theory, let alone whatever this is." "That's your problem," his older self said. "You keep underestimating yourself. So do they." He gestured at the aliens. "That's why I'm here. To correct the timeline." "The timeline doesn't need correction," Sostov hissed, scales flashing dangerous reds and oranges. "Your presence is the anomaly." "Actually," older Dave said, "your intervention was the anomaly. In the original timeline, humanity develops interstellar travel independently in about 40 years. We encounter the consortium peacefully, but someone," he glanced pointedly at Sostov, decided to accelerate the process by abducting test subjects. That decision fractures the timeline and eventually leads to a war that destroys half the galaxy. The chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of the ship's systems. "These accusations are baseless," Sestoth finally said. "You cannot prove." An alarm cut through the tension, different from the previous ones, higher pitched and more urgent. "Proximity alert." Diskag translated for Dave's benefit. Multiple vessels approaching at superluminal speeds. A holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber, showing a three-dimensional map of space around the consortium ship. Dozens of red markers converged on their position. "Rex Battlefleet," Rum said, antennae quivering. "How did they assemble so quickly?" "Because they've been waiting," Older Dave said. "Monitoring. You thought you were being clever abducting humans discreetly, but they've been watching Earth for centuries. Just like you have." "We need to enter hyperspace immediately," Fit suggested. "Too late," Older Dave replied. "They've already deployed dimensional anchors. This ship isn't going anywhere." Toph's scales shifted to a deep blue. "How do you know their tactical capabilities?" "Unless—" The administrator's compound eyes narrowed. "You've had contact with the Vrex." "I fought them for 15 years. Older Dave corrected. "After they decimated Earth's major cities in response to the consortium's meddling." The ship shuddered as the first volley of enemy weapons struck its shields. "Shield integrity at 87%, announced the ship's AI. "Foreign objects attempting to breach hull integrity in 17 locations. "They're deploying boarding drones," Sekkisk explained, mandibles clicking rapidly. "Standard Vrek invasion protocol." "Not standard," Older Dave countered. "They usually lead with electromagnetic pulse weapons to disable communications. This is different. They're coming for something specific. For you," Younger Dave realized. "Both of us. They want to capture, not destroy." His older self nodded. "Smart kid." "I'm you," Younger Dave pointed out. "And I'm a lot smarter than I used to be." "Soft tooth," interrupted their banter. "Security forces cannot repel a full-scale Vrex boarding party. We must evacuate high-value personnel." "Running won't help," Older Dave said. "They can track us across dimensional boundaries now. Your only option is to fight. Our weapons are ineffective against their neural phase armor." Evorm objected. "Then we need different weapons," Younger Dave suggested. He turned to his future self. "You came back to change things. You must have a plan." Older Dave smiled. "I do, but they're not going to like it." He nodded toward the aliens. The ship rocked with another impact, more violent than the first. "Shield integrity at 62%, the AI reported. "Hull breach in Sector 12. "We're out of options, Administrator," Sekadek said. "If the human has a strategy." Sestoth's scales rippled with reluctance. "Explain your plan." "First," Older Dave said, "you need to understand what you've stumbled into. The Vrex and the consortium have been playing a cosmic chess game for millennia, each trying to secure evolutionary advantages. Humans are the unexpected queens on that chessboard. Because of our dimensionally receptive brains?" Younger Dave asked. "Partly. But mainly because we can do this." Older Dave closed his glowing eyes and raised his hands. The air in the chamber began to shimmer. Golden particles of light swirling around him. The ship's gravity fluctuated, and for a moment everything seemed to hover weightlessly. "By all ancestral gods," Fort whispered in awe. "He's manipulating the gravitational field," Voram observed. "Without technology. Not just gravity," Older Dave said, opening his eyes. The golden light had spread surrounding both versions of Dave in a luminous aura. Chromium particles exist naturally in human bodies in trace amounts. That's why we can perceive time linearly when most species experience it as simultaneous moments. When exposed to concentrated chromium, he gestured, and a small temporal vortex appeared between his palms. a miniature version of the one he'd arrived through. We can manipulate the fabric of space-time directly. Younger Dave stared at his hands in disbelief. I can do that? Not yet. But you will. The ship lurched violently, throwing everyone off balance except the older Dave, who remained eerily steady, as if anchored to reality by something stronger than artificial gravity. Hull integrity compromised in sectors 7 through 15, the AI announced. Rex boarding parties detected in multiple locations. We're out of time, older Dave said. Here's the plan. I'm going to create a temporal bubble around this ship, essentially removing us from normal space-time. It will buy us a few hours to prepare. Prepare for what? Saz-Toph demanded. For me to teach him. Older Dave nodded toward his younger self, how to access his abilities. Together, we might generate enough energy to create a dimensional shift that will disable the Rex fleet. Might? Iskek, repeated skeptically. 70-30 odds. Older Dave admitted. Better than the 0% chance you have otherwise. Saz-Toph's scales shifted through several colors before settling on a decisive purple. Do it. Older Dave nodded and closed his eyes again. The golden aura around him intensified, spreading throughout the chamber and beyond. The alarms suddenly went silent, and the vibrations from the attacking ships ceased. It's done, he said, opening his eyes. We exist between moments now. The Vrace are still out there, still attacking, but from their perspective we've vanished. Fascinating, Ram said, studying a datapad that showed sensor readings. Time outside our bubble has essentially stopped. Not stopped, older Dave corrected. We're just experiencing it at a dramatically accelerated rate. What feels like hours to us will be microseconds to them. And now? Younger Dave asked nervously. Now I teach you to access abilities you didn't know you had. Older Dave turned to the aliens. We need space, and I need access to your chromium reserves. Absolutely not, Saz-Toph objected. Chromium is the most valuable resource in the consortium. It's also the only thing that will save your scaly hide. Older Dave countered. Your choice, share some chromium or be boarded by Vrex hunters. They're not known for taking prisoners. After a tense standoff, Saz-Toph relented. The aliens led both Daves to a large open chamber deep within the ship. At its center sat a crystalline structure pulsing with blue-white energy. The ship's chromium core, Saz-Toph explained. It powers all temporal functions. Older Dave whistled appreciatively. That's a lot more refined chromium than I expected. This will work. What exactly are we doing? Younger Dave asked. I'm going to jumpstart your abilities. Older Dave positioned his younger self directly in front of the chromium core. This will hurt, a lot, but it's necessary. Wait. What? Before younger Dave could finish his protest, older Dave placed his glowing hands on either side of his counterpart's head. The effect was immediate and excruciating. Younger Dave felt like his brain was being rewritten, cell by cell. He screamed as golden light poured from his eyes, nose, and mouth. The aliens retreated to a safe distance, watching in a mixture of horror and fascination as the chromium core pulsed in rhythm with Dave's convulsions. After what seemed like an eternity but was probably only minutes, the pain subsided. Younger Dave collapsed to his knees, gasping for breath. When he looked up, his eyes had the same golden glow as his future self's. What did you do to me? He panted. Accelerated your chromium absorption by about 15 years, older Dave explained, helping him stand. How do you feel? Like my skull was used as a pinball machine. Younger Dave blinked, adjusting to his new perception. The world looked different now. Layers upon layers of reality visible simultaneously. Probability streams flowing around solid objects. I can see everything. Not everything. Not yet. But enough to help. Over the next several hours, or what felt like hours within their temporal bubble, older Dave guided his younger self through exercises to control his new abilities. The aliens observed from behind energy shields, recording every moment. Younger Dave learned to manipulate small objects with gravitational fields, to perceive events moments before they happened, and to create tiny rifts in space-time. Each success increased the aliens' unease. This is beyond anything our species has achieved in 50,000 years of evolution, Resm whispered to Tisk. A primitive mammal shouldn't be capable of such feats. Perhaps they were never primitive, Fitch suggested. Perhaps we misunderstood their potential entirely. Meanwhile, political tensions escalated among the ship's leadership. A delegation of ranking officers confronted Sistoth in a chamber adjacent to where the Daves were training. This is madness. Administrator, argued a crystalline being whose body refracted light in hypnotic patterns. The human represents an existential threat to consortium stability. We should terminate both versions immediately. And face the Vrex fleet unprotected? Sistoth countered. The humans are our only viable defense. Today, perhaps, said another officer. A gaseous entity contained within an environmental suit. But what about tomorrow? If one human can manipulate fundamental forces of reality, what happens when their entire species develops these abilities? The timeline must be preserved, Sistoth insisted. Once the Rex threat is neutralized, we can reevaluate our approach to Earth. Unknown to the aliens, younger Dave could now perceive their conversation despite the supposed soundproofing of their chamber. He turned to his older self with concern. They're planning to eliminate us once we've served our purpose. Of course they are. Older Dave replied while creating a complex pattern of energy between his palms. The consortium didn't become the dominant power in 3 galaxies by leaving threats unchecked. So we're helping people who want to kill us? For now, the Vrex would do worse than kill us. They'd use us as templates to engineer weapons that could tear reality apart. Older Dave dispersed the energy pattern with a flick of his wrists. I think you're ready. Let's talk to our gracious hosts. When the aliens returned, both Daves stood side by side, their golden auras pulsing in synchronization. We can generate enough energy to create a dimensional shift, Older Dave announced. It should disrupt the Vrex neural systems long enough for your weapons to penetrate their defenses. Should? Sistoth questioned. Nothing involving 11-dimensional mathematics is certain. Younger Dave said with newfound confidence. But it's your only option. There is an additional consideration, Soxkin interjected. Our sensors indicate the temporal bubble is destabilizing. We have perhaps 20 minutes before it collapses. That's not possible, Older Dave frowned. The bubble should last at least 12 hours, unless someone is deliberately weakening it. Younger Dave suggested, looking pointedly at Sistoth. Perhaps someone who doesn't want us to succeed. The High Administrator's scales rippled defensively. These accusations are baseless. Really? Younger Dave closed his glowing eyes briefly, then opened them with a cold smile. Because I can see the probability streams. Administrator, I can see the orders you sent to engineering to introduce chromium destabilizers into the ship's systems. The aliens froze in collective shock. You can perceive that? Ram asked, antennae rigid with alarm. I told you, Older Dave said smugly. Humans make connections your species can't comprehend. Sistoth's scales flushed deep red. You've made your point. What do you propose? We stick to the plan, Older Dave said, but with one adjustment. When we create the dimensional shift, we'll need to be at the center of it, directly exposed to the chromium core. That level of exposure would be fatal, Fog objected. To your species, yes, Younger Dave said. To us? Well, that's why he's here. He nodded toward his future self. He survived it once. The temporal bubble began to flicker around them, reality bleeding through in disjointed flashes. We need to move now, Older Dave urged. Get your weapon systems ready to target the wreck ships the moment they become vulnerable. As they rushed back to the chromium core, Younger Dave pulled his future self aside. You're not telling me everything, are you? This isn't just about saving the consortium ship. Older Dave's expression hardened. The consortium and the Rex have been manipulating Earth for centuries, directing our evolution, experimenting on humans. What happens today sets the stage for humanity's future. If we do this right, Earth gets a fighting chance. If not, we become pawns in their galactic chess game. Younger Dave finished. Exactly. They reached the chromium core as the temporal bubble began collapsing faster. Through the flickering reality, they could see Rex boarding parties frozen in mid-motion throughout the ship, mere seconds from breaking through when the bubble had formed. Weapon systems targeted and ready. Tiskik reported from a control station. Both Daves positioned themselves on opposite sides of the chromium core. What do I do? Younger Dave asked. Place your hands on the core, his older self instructed. Focus on the dimensional boundaries you can perceive. When I say now, push against them with everything you have. Younger Dave placed his palms against the crystalline surface. Immediately, energy surged through him, more intense than before. He could feel reality itself bending around him, dimensions folding and unfolding like cosmic origami. The bubble is collapsing, Ram warned. 10 seconds remaining. Now, older Dave shouted. Both versions of Dave Mackenzie pushed against the fabric of reality, simultaneously. The chromium core flared blindingly bright, its energy flowing through them and amplifying their combined effort. The ship shuddered as space-time warped around it. 5 dimensions. 7. 11. Older Dave counted through gritted teeth. Younger Dave felt like his body was being torn apart at the atomic level. I can't hold it. You have to. Push harder. We'll collapse in 3, 2, 1. Brett announced. The temporal bubble shattered just as the dimensional shift reached its peak. A wave of golden energy exploded outward from the ship, catching the Vrex boarding parties in mid-action. Their bodies convulsed as neural systems failed, weapons dropping from suddenly limp appendages. Fire all weapons, Sestov commanded. The consortium ship's defensive systems unleashed a barrage of energy beams that tore through the now vulnerable Rex vessels. Explosions blossomed in space around them as ship after ship was destroyed. But something was wrong. The dimensional shift wasn't stabilizing as planned. Instead, it was growing, expanding beyond the immediate space around the ship. It's too powerful, older Dave shouted. The reaction is self-sustaining. What does that mean? Younger Dave cried, unable to remove his hands from the core as energy continued to pour through him. It means we miscalculated. The chromium concentration is too high. The aliens were retreating in panic, emergency protocols activating throughout the ship. Containment fields sprang up, isolating the core chamber. What happens now? Younger Dave managed to ask through the pain. His future self met his gaze with resigned acceptance. Now everything changes. The golden energy coalesced around both Daves, binding them together in a cocoon of pure chromium energy. Their separate consciousnesses began to merge as dimensions collapsed into one another. Warling, the ship's AI announced. Critical dimensional instability detected. Cascade failure imminent. Through the viewing ports they could see space itself beginning to fold and ripple. Stars blurred and stretched as fundamental constants fluctuated. The wrecked ships, not destroyed by weapons fire, were being torn apart by gravitational shears. But the consortium ship was suffering the same fate. Hull plates buckled as opposing forces pulled in multiple directions simultaneously. The aliens fled toward escape pods as systems failed catastrophically. At the epicenter of the chaos, the two Daves were becoming something else entirely. Something neither human nor alien, but a being existing across multiple points in space-time simultaneously. The last thing younger Dave heard before his consciousness expanded beyond human limitation was Sastov's voice over the communication system. May the ancestors forgive us. We have awakened something we cannot control. And then reality itself cracked open like an egg. Dave Mackenzie existed everywhere and nowhere. His consciousness stretched across 17 dimensions simultaneously, perceiving the universe not as discrete objects and events, but as probability fields and energy patterns. Time flowed around him like a river around a stone. Not a straight line, but a complex, branching delta with countless possible tributaries. Somewhere in this multidimensional expanse, he could sense his former self and future self, no longer separate entities but aspects of a singular being unfettered by linear time. The consortium flagship had disintegrated around them, its component atoms scattered across multiple realities. The Vrex fleet had suffered the same fate. Their meticulously engineered weapons useless against the fundamental forces. Dave now manipulated instinctively. But there was a problem. The dimensional rift continued to expand, threatening to unravel the fabric of space-time across an entire sector of the galaxy. Billions of lives, human and alien alike, hung in the balance. I need to contain this, Dave thought, attempting to impose order on the chaos he'd unleashed. But even with his expanded consciousness, the task seemed impossible. The chromium reaction had bypassed critical thresholds, becoming self-sustaining. As he struggled to control the expanding rift, Dave sensed something moving through the multidimensional chaos, entities, even more advanced than the consortium, drawn to the disturbance like cosmic antibodies responding to an infection. The architects, whispered a memory from his future self. The ones who came before. Ancient beings who existed primarily in dimensions beyond conventional perception. The architects had seeded the galaxy with life billions of years ago before retreating to watch their experiment unfold. They rarely intervened directly. But a tier in reality of this magnitude demanded their attention. Dave could sense their vast alien consciousness examining him, curious, calculating, and ultimately alarmed by what they found. Human, they communicated. Not in words, but in pure conceptual understanding. You should not be capable of this. Trust me, Dave responded in kind. I'm just as surprised as you are. Your species was not designed to access these dimensional planes. Designed? Dave latched onto the word. You created humans. We created the potential for life, came the response. Evolution shaped your form, but this capability, this is unexpected. Dave sensed their intention forming to erase the anomaly, seal the rift, and reset the affected region of space-time to a stable configuration. The reset would eliminate all trace of the consortium ship, the Vrex fleet, and most importantly, Dave himself. Wait. He projected desperately. I can fix this. Impossible. The cascade has progressed beyond containment thresholds. Maybe for you, Dave countered. But I'm the one who caused it. I'm at the center of the pattern. A ripple of surprise passed through the architect's collective consciousness. They had existed for eons, evolved beyond the concerns of physical beings. Yet this ephemeral creature dared to suggest it could accomplish what they could not. Explain, they demanded. You're trying to solve this with perfect order, Dave communicated. But this chaos came from human unpredictability. You need the same unpredictability to counter it. You need human improvisation. The architects conferred among themselves, their thoughts flowing around Dave like currents in an ocean. He caught fragments of their debate, concerns about precedent, arguments about intervention protocols, calculations of probability. Finally, they reached consensus. Proceed, human. But know that failure means obliteration, not just for you, but for your entire species. We cannot allow this capability to persist unchecked. No pressure, Dave thought to himself, though in this state of expanded consciousness, the architects undoubtedly hurt him. He focused his awareness on the heart of the dimensional rift, where reality itself had fractured. Conventional physics offered no solution. The normal rules simply didn't apply in this intermediate state between dimensions. He needed something else, something uniquely human. What did humans have that ancient, hyper-evolved beings did not? The answer came not from his expanded consciousness, but from a memory of his classroom on Earth. A struggling student had asked why they needed to learn physics if computers could calculate everything. Dave had responded, Computers can calculate, but they can't create. They can't make intuitive leaps or find connections between seemingly unrelated concepts. That's the human superpower. Intuition. Connection. The ability to see patterns where none should exist. Dave reached deep into his fragmented consciousness, gathering the scattered aspects of himself across all dimensions. The physics teacher from Earth, the reluctant recruit, the battle-scarred veteran from a future that might now never exist. He pulled them together, forcing a coherence that defied the laws of quantum physics. The architects observed with growing interest as Dave began to manipulate dimensional energies in ways they had never considered. Not through precise calculation but through intuitive leaps, creating asymmetric patterns that somehow balanced each other, introducing controlled chaos to counteract uncontrolled chaos. It was messy, inefficient, utterly illogical. And it was working. The expanding rift began to contract, dimensional barriers reforming along new configurations. Dave wasn't restoring the previous state of reality that was impossible, but creating a new stability that incorporated the disruption rather than erasing it. As the multidimensional tier knitted itself back together, Dave sensed fragments of the consortium ship and its occupants scattered across probability space. With careful precision, he gathered these fragments, pulling them back into a cohesive reality. Not exactly as they were before, but close enough. The effort was immense, taxing even his expanded capabilities. Dave felt himself being drawn thin, stretched across too many dimensions. But he persisted, using his human stubbornness as an anchor. Finally, after what could have been moments or millennia in this timeless state, the rift closed completely. A new equilibrium established itself across the affected region of space, and Dave, all versions of him, snapped back into singular existence. He awoke, gasping on a cold floor, his body painfully solid and limited after the freedom of multidimensional existence. Around him, the consortium command center rematerialized, its occupants dazed and disoriented. What happened? Six. Kisk managed, mandibles clicking weakly. Dave sat up, noting with surprise that his eyes no longer glowed. He felt normal, or almost normal. There was a residual awareness at the back of his mind, a faint perception of dimensional layers beyond conventional reality. I fixed it, he said simply. Mostly. Seastoth's scales rippled with disbelief as the administrator helped roar him to its feet. Impossible. The chromium reaction was beyond containment parameters.
Yeah, well, I'm getting pretty tired of being told what's impossible.
Dave stood shakily, looking around the reconstituted command center. Where's the Vrex fleet? Sensors show no vessels within detection range. Petit reported, checking a console that flickered back to life. They're simply gone. Not gone, Dave corrected. Redistributed. Their component particles have been reintegrated into the universal background energy. Basically, they've been recycled. The aliens stared at him in stunned silence. You did this? Seastoth finally asked. Alone? Not exactly alone. Dave hesitated, unsure how to explain. There were others. Observers. They call themselves the architects. The word sent a visible shock through the assembled aliens. Kiskek's exoskeleton paled dramatically, while Vorium's antennae went completely rigid. The progenitors. Seastoth whispered, using a different term. You communicated with the progenitors. If that's what you call them, then yes. Dave rubbed his temples, feeling the mother of all headaches building. They were going to reset everything. Erase the rift, the ship, me, all of it. I convinced them to let me try another approach. The progenitors have not directly interacted with evolved species in over 2 million cycles. Vrem said, voice trembling. Their existence is considered largely theoretical by most consortium scientists. Well, they're real, Dave assured them. And they're very interested in humans now. Before anyone could respond, an alarm chimed softly from a nearby console. Fred moved to investigate, then turned to Substov with obvious concern. Hi, Administrator. We're receiving a priority transmission from the Consortium Council. All 12 High Ministers are demanding immediate contact. Sustov's scales rippled anxiously. The dimensional disturbance must have been detected throughout Consortiums. It was detected a lot further than that, Dave said. Try across most of the galaxy. The command center's main view screen activated, revealing a semicircle of diverse alien beings seated in what appeared to be an ornate council chamber. At the center sat a luminous entity composed entirely of swirling energy contained within a specialized environment suit. High Minister Ozar Saztoth greeted, attempting to maintain composure. Honored Council. I can explain the recent anomaly. Silence. Administrator. The energy being interrupted. Its voice was melodious yet commanding. Our sensors detected a Class 1 reality distortion originating from your vessel. Explanation is not optional. It is mandatory. Saztoth's scales shifted through nervous patterns. There was an incident involving chromium experimentation. However, the situation has been contained. The High Minister's energy form pulsed brighter. Our sensors also detected communication patterns consistent with progenitor interaction. Confirm or deny. Dave stepped forward before Saztoth could respond. That would be because of me. The council members reacted with various expressions of shock, from tentacle waving to bioluminescent flashing. Identify yourself, demanded the High Minister. Dave Mackenzie, physics teacher from Earth. Recently unemployed, currently dealing with an existential crisis after briefly existing in 17 dimensions simultaneously. A human, Othsar observed, energy patterns fluctuating rapidly. Administrator Saztoth. Explain the presence of this specimen. Specimen, Dave repeated indignantly. I just saved your entire civilization from dimensional collapse. A little gratitude wouldn't kill you. The human speaks truth, came a new voice, not from the council chamber but seemingly from everywhere at once. The command center's lights flickered as a shimmering translucent figure appeared beside Dave. It had no definite form, shifting between various geometric patterns that human eyes struggled to comprehend, but Dave recognized it immediately. You're one of the architects, he said. We have chosen to manifest in a form comprehensible to limited beings, the entity confirmed. This is unprecedented, but circumstances are exceptional. The council members were visibly stunned. Many had risen from their seats. Others appeared frozen in shock. Impossible, whispered Othsar. The progenitors do not directly intervene. Your understanding of our protocols is incomplete. The architect replied. We intervene when necessary. The human's actions made intervention necessary. Am I in trouble? Dave asked the entity. No. The architect's form rippled with what might have been amusement. You are an anomaly, but an instructive one. Your species possesses capabilities we did not anticipate when life was seeded on your world. What exactly are those capabilities? Saztoth asked cautiously. The architect turned its attention to the High Administrator. Humans perceive reality through a cognitive framework unique among evolved species. They naturally form connections between concepts without logical progression. They act on intuition rather than certainty. They create rather than simply calculate. That hardly seems advantageous, one council member observed. And yet, the architect continued, when faced with dimensional collapse, our perfect calculations failed where human improvisation succeeded. Dave felt uncomfortably like a lab specimen being discussed by scientists. Look, I appreciate the vote of confidence. But could someone explain what happens now? Can I go home? I've got bills to pay and my car still needs fixing. The architect's form shifted closer to Dave. The chromium exposure has permanently altered your quantum state, David Mackenzie. You cannot return to your previous existence. What does that mean? It means, Saztoth translated, that you are now bound to the dimensional fabric you repaired. Your consciousness exists partially outside conventional space-time. Great, Dave muttered. So I'm what? Some kind of interdimensional handyman? You are the first of a new designation, the architect stated. A bridge between evolved species and higher dimensional awareness. Others of your kind may develop similar abilities, but you are the prototype. The council chamber erupted in overlapping voices and signals, various ministers arguing amongst themselves. HFY's energy form flared bright enough to silence them. This changes everything, the High Minister declared. If humans possess even a fraction of this potential naturally, they represent both unprecedented opportunity and unprecedented threat. A moment of clarification, the architect interjected. We have observed your species' interactions with Earth. Both the Consortium and the Vrex have attempted to manipulate human development for your own purposes. These interventions will cease immediately. The command was unmistakable. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. The Vrex will not comply, Uthsar warned. They have invested centuries in human genetic research. The Vrex fleet that attacked this vessel has been redistributed. The architect noted, this was the humans' doing, not ours. Perhaps explain this to their leadership as a demonstration of why interference would be unwise. Dave looked between the alien politicians and the dimensional being, suddenly understanding his position. You're using me as a deterrent, he realized. A warning to everyone about what humans can do if pushed. It is an accurate warning. The architect confirmed. Your species should be allowed to develop without outside manipulation. What you become should be determined by your own choices, not the agenda of older civilizations. And what am I supposed to do in the meantime? Dave asked. I can't exactly go back to teaching high school physics now. That decision is yours, the architect replied. But we suggest a role as intermediary. The Consortium has agreed to establish formal relations with Earth, with appropriate technological exchange to compensate for centuries of covert observation. Agreed? Sistoth questioned. The Council has made no such. The Council agrees, Othar interrupted firmly, clearly recognizing the implicit command from the architect. A diplomatic mission will be prepared immediately. Dave glanced around the command center at the aliens who had abducted him mere days ago and now regarded him with a mixture of fear and fascination. So, I'm to be Earth's first ambassador to the stars. That's not what I expected when I woke up Tuesday morning. Your species consistently defies expectation, the architect observed. It is your most valuable and most dangerous trait. As the conversation continued, with the Council begrudgingly outlining plans for first contact with Earth, Dave felt the residual awareness in his mind expanding slightly. He could perceive not just this reality but echoes of others, parallel timelines where things had unfolded differently. In one, his future self had never appeared, and the Consortium had continued its covert observation of Earth for centuries. In another, the Vrex had reached Earth first, enslaving humanity for their dimensional potential. In yet another, humanity had developed interstellar travel independently, emerging onto the galactic stage as equals rather than subjects. All possibilities, all equally real in the multidimensional framework. Dave now partially inhabited. There's something you're not telling them, he said quietly to the architect when the Council's attention was momentarily diverted. There are many things we do not tell them, the entity acknowledged. Limited beings require limited information. But you're telling me, you are no longer entirely limited. Your consciousness exists partially in our realm. And what is it I should know that they shouldn't? The architect's form shimmered, compressing into a more focused pattern. The dimensional abilities you demonstrated are not unique to you, David Mackenzie. They are dormant in all humans, a side effect of how your brains evolved to process reality. Dave's eyes widened. You mean anyone could do what I did? With sufficient chromium exposure and proper circumstances? Yes. Your species evolved on a world with trace chromium deposits in the environment. Over generations, you developed neural pathways capable of processing dimensional information no other evolved species can perceive. So, I'm not special, Dave concluded with a mixture of relief and disappointment. You misunderstand, the architect corrected. You are the first to activate these abilities, but not the last. What you represent is not an anomaly but a preview. The first glimpse of what humanity will eventually become. Dave looked back at the council members still debating first contact protocols. At HFY, and Varam and Fit watching him with newfound respect. At Sci Toth, whose scales now displayed patterns indicating deep concern. They're afraid of us, he realized. Not just of me, but of what I represent. As they should be, the architect confirmed. Fear often accompanies respect. Both are appropriate responses to potential one cannot fully comprehend. And what happens when more humans develop these abilities? When Earth becomes a planet of people who can tear holes in reality. That, the architect said, its form beginning to fade back into the dimensional background, is why we have chosen to reveal ourselves after millennia of observation. Your species requires guidance. As the entity disappeared completely, Dave felt a final thought impressed directly into his consciousness. We created the conditions for life throughout this galaxy. David Mackenzie. But your species may be the first to truly understand why. The implications of that statement would take Dave years to fully comprehend. For now, he turned back to the aliens who had unwittingly triggered humanity's acceleration toward its cosmic destiny. So, he said with a grin that made several council members visibly uncomfortable about that ambassadorship. I have a few conditions to discuss. In the weeks that followed, as the consortium prepared for official first contact with Earth, rumors spread throughout galactic civilization. Stories of a human who had communicated with the progenitors, who had manipulated dimensional forces beyond even consortium understanding, who had single-handedly dispersed a Rex battle fleet. Most dismissed these as exaggerations. A few recognized them as warnings. And deep within the multidimensional fabric of reality, the architects watched with growing interest as other humans on Earth began to dream of stars rearranging themselves and whispers from beyond conventional perception. Evolution was accelerating. The experiment was entering its next phase. Humanity was waking up, and the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy were beginning to realize that they had never been the apex predators they'd believed themselves to be. Merely temporary caretakers, keeping the universe running until the true inheritors were ready to claim their birthright. As Dave Mackenzie prepared to return to Earth aboard a consortium diplomatic vessel, he gazed out at the vast expanse of space with new eyes that could see beyond the visible spectrum, beyond the conventional dimensions. You know what's funny, he said to Kiskis, who had been assigned as his liaison. I was fired for telling a student his science project violated the laws of thermodynamics. Turns out I was the one breaking universal law. The Consortium Council is concerned about potential instability when more humans develop abilities similar to yours, Tizkek admitted, mandibles clicking nervously. Dave smiled. They should be. We're the species that looked at lightning and thought, I bet I could use that to power a toaster. Imagine what we'll do with dimensional manipulation. That, Sag Tax replied, is precisely what terrifies them.